Good morning and welcome to our first webinar of our October webinar series. Today we're covering advances in heavy-duty charging with guest speakers from ABB, CALSTART, and FIER Automotive. My name is Simbiat Yusuf, Member Relations Manager at Fourth. I'll be making some announcement before passing it along to our moderator today, Erin Galiger, our Program Manager here at Fourth. Attendees, we ask that you please be sure to submit all your questions through the attendee chat. We'll get through Q&A at the end of all of our presentations today. We'll also be sending out the recording of the webinar and the slides after the webinar. A brief introduction to Fourth for some of you that are new. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for smart transportation through our work in four main focus areas, which are industry development, demonstration project, policy advocacy, and consumer engagement. Through all of this, we foster the adoption of clean transportation. If you want more information about Fourth, who we are, our events, our membership, you can find that on our website at fourthmobility.org. We are currently seeking proposal submissions for the upcoming Roadmap 2021. Proposal submission deadline are November 20th, 2020. Registration and sponsorship opportunities are also open. For more information on Roadmap, you can find that at roadmapfourth.org, and we'll also be sending information in the recap email as well. Do you want to join the discussion on expanding career opportunities and pathways in e-mobility sector, or building more diverse and inclusive organizations and relationships to strengthen equity partnerships? Then make sure you're registered for the National E-Mobility Equity Conference taking place November 12th and 13th. This is a co-presentation by Fourth and EV Noir. We're excited for all of the programming, and you want to make sure you're registered. It's a 2-day conference, November 12th and 13th, and with scale pricing for nonprofit and government organizations. And with that, that's all of our announcement. And now I'll pass it over to Program Manager Erin to introduce our speakers and get us started on our topic today.
Welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Erin Galiger and I'm a Program Manager here at Fourth. I've been with Fourth for about 1.5 years, and part of my role is to work with a number of different stakeholders who are evaluating and preparing for electric fleets, whether it be light duty, agricultural tractors, and medium and heavy duty. It's hard to miss the press releases from the major OEMs and large fleet operators as they pledge to go electric. So rather than talking about the vehicles themselves, we'll be thinking through what exactly is needed to keep those vehicles charged, especially as fleets convert to electric at scale. I'm joined by some excellent panelists today who will discuss the advancements in heavy-duty charging infrastructure, real-world applications of the charging, and current strategies to deploy and manage more charging stations to support the electrified transformation in the heavy-duty sector. Our first speaker, my former colleague, is Ruth Liddell. She's a project manager with ABB. She has been with ABB over 4 years, where she has had various roles in ABB's low-voltage drives and measurement analytics businesses prior to joining the electric vehicle infrastructure team in January 2018. In her current role, she acts as the key contact for customers supporting projects ranging from the installation of single chargers for R&D use to deploying a fleet of chargers for public transit systems. She is also responsible for aftermarket infrastructure upgrade campaigns in North America. Ruth holds a BS in Industrial Engineering from Purdue University. Boiler up. Following Ruth, we have Rob Kroon. He's a project manager at FIER Automotive. He's an experienced consultant with a track record in the electric mobility and logistics sector. Since 2011, Rob has been active in this sector in his role at FIER and various projects across Europe. One example project, which I'm certain we'll hear more about today, is the Electric Green Last Mile program. It's a project with 44 electric trucks and ultra-fast chargers, where Rob is the project manager. Rob has made a solid contribution to making mobility and logistics more sustainable in the Netherlands and abroad by means of electrification of fleets and the associated charging infrastructure to advising various national governments in the field of mobility policy. Our final speaker today is Bill Van Amburg. He's an executive vice president and is the initiative leader for the medium and heavy duty truck and off-road equipment sector at CALSTART. His responsibilities include heading up strategy and overseeing the initiative's portfolio of activities, as well as leading business development. He and his team recently developed with the California Air Resources Board a strategy for market transformation of medium and heavy duty vehicles for zero emission, low NOx, and efficiency technology pathways that formed the basis for a multi-year investment plan. This strategy is also now the basis of CalStart's newest program, the Global Commercial Vehicle Drive to Zero initiative. His teams operate multiple projects, including California HVIP, Drive Clean Chicago, New York Truck Voucher Initiative Project, or Incentive Project, High Efficiency Truck Users Forum, and a portfolio of technology development, demonstration, and validation projects. As questions come up, feel free to post them in the chat. Otherwise, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Ruth Liddell at ABB. Take it away, Ruth.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, Erin. And thank you to FIER for the opportunity to speak today. I think we've got some strong panelists here today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone. So we'll be speaking on the advances of heavy-duty charging. As Erin mentioned, I'm a project manager from ABB. I've been with ABB over 4 years now, coming up on 3 in this awesome industry. And I've been a project manager, like she said, responsible for execution of high-power charging projects across the U.S. So today I'll talk to you a little bit about just what ABB is, if you're not familiar, and then specifically heavy-duty charging and my experience as a project manager. I'll highlight the differences between light-duty charging and heavy-duty charging, as well as share some important lessons learned for deploying projects across the U.S. And then finally, I'll speak on summarizing some key takeaways that I think are important for scaling your fleet. So, ABB, we are a transportation electrification leader. We have over 17,000 DC fast chargers that have been sold globally in over 81 countries. We have been in the industry over 10 years. So in my opinion, that makes us pretty seasoned. And what we do is offer a wide range of charging hardware technology from 24 kilowatts all the way up to 600 kilowatts, depending on your application. So we'll get into a little bit more of what works for heavy duty charging today. So for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with electric vehicles and charging and you're very new to this, I'm assuming that's probably not most people on this call, but just wanted to briefly touch on the difference of AC and DC charging and show you that we're going to talk about DC charging. So the things on the right today that you see, the hardware technology for those heavy duty applications. DC charging is typically the minutes to hours for heavy duty. And AC charging would be that hours to almost days in some cases, depending on how big the batteries are. I think I froze for a second. So now we're going to talk about the fun stuff, the difference in light duty versus heavy duty, and what you really should be considering when you're focused on the heavy duty. So the 3 things you see here, kind of simple level, power level, features, and footprint. So when we're talking about power level, we mean the power level on site. So these bigger vehicles carry heavier loads, which then means bigger batteries, and charging the appropriate amount of time is really important for us. So quicker charge times mean you need more power on site. You also need to take into consideration how many trucks or buses you would be charging or operating at any given time to really understand your power level that you would need based on how many chargers you're going to need and the types of chargers. So one thing I would strongly recommend on that power level discussion and thought is engaging your utilities early. Talking with them about, what does the site look like today? What's it going to need to look like down the road? The second thing you want to be thinking about, which is very different from light duty to heavy duty, is the features on the chargers. So right now, a lot of the chargers that you might see at a grocery store or a rest stop or even in your apartment building have credit card readers. They've got screens. They're easy to interact with. They might even have somewhere that you can authenticate the charging session with an RFID reader. You actually don't need a lot of those for the heavy duty. So heavy duty applications are typically fleet applications. They're behind a fence. They're at an access controlled site. So really all you need is for it to be simple and easy for the driver to use. So as long as you really train the driver on how to use it, the features are simple. And the biggest feature that you need to then be considering is just what does your network operator or back office look like, so that you can understand what's going on with your chargers, how you manage your assets, things like that. So arguably, less features should make it easier for the driver and operator, which makes it a lot easier for the drivers to transition from driving trucks where they need to fuel up versus driving trucks where then they need to charge the trucks, excuse me. And then the third thing to consider is footprint. So you have to be a lot more strategic about where these chargers go, what the footprint of your site looks like. Can you be strategic and creative with it? So that's something to consider versus light duty, where you might have a parking lot, like I said, or it's a large parking structure in an apartment building. So footprint is the third thing that is really a big difference from light duty to heavy duty, because you don't want to affect those day-to-day operations when it's heavy duty. So as I mentioned, you can really get creative with your footprint. As you can see here, you've got plug in at a depot overhead, plug in, you can have your charger en route. But really beyond that, the takeaway of this slide is to show you that although every site and use case is different, the project execution is similar. So what we can do in the heavy duty space is learn a lot from what our friends and those who have gone before us in the light duty space have done. So there's a few lessons learned there. The first one is something we've seen with light duty, which is all of these e-cars on the road have the charging port located at various places on the vehicle. And that comes into an issue then with the length of the cord versus the site layout. How do you accommodate all of those? It's something that you need to consider if your fleet or whatever it is going to be using various truck or bus OEMs, and the charging port might not be the same in every location. The second thing that you want to consider that is something I've seen with both light and heavy duty charging applications is operational lifetime of the charger. A lot of times we focus on and we're excited about getting the charger commissioned and getting the site live and getting that initial test charge. But we also want to be thinking about, what does my day-to-day operations look like? What's my expected charger uptime? Warranty doesn't always cover charger downtime. So you have to be thinking about the future with that in mind as well. We've got customers that would interact with these on the light duty side, and now it's operators interacting with them on the heavy duty side. So you have that human factor. You have to plan for the human factor with the maintenance of your chargers. So I would definitely personally recommend keeping spare parts on hand, training your service technicians or your maintenance team on kind of tier 1 support to be able to quickly service your chargers. So a final lesson learned that I want to kind of touch on, that is something we learned from the heavy duty charging experience from a recent project as well, is thinking about that back office. So making sure that you're able to see what's going on with a pilot project like this Volvo Lights project, and make sure your understanding of how your chargers are operating, what's going on with them, how your drivers are interacting with them, is with using that network operator on the back end side. It also allows for asset security and other important features. So then finally, scaling your fleet. So there's a few key takeaways, things I might have briefly mentioned that are very important for then scaling your fleet. The first one, engaging your utilities early and often, making sure your utility understands how you are planning for the future, what potential number of chargers or hardware asset you might need in the future. So the second thing is thinking about the future today. So I know I keep saying that, but as you can see from this photo, we have, chargers, and there might not be vehicles there yet. I would say always plan for your infrastructure to be there before your first vehicle is delivered, and potentially even for the next 6 months or a year for when those vehicles are on their way. Having that in place is very important. It's a lot easier for kind of jumping into it. The next thing is related to that, vehicle interoperability, selecting hardware manufacturers and vehicle OEMs that are very much interested and have done the work with vehicle interoperability, so that you and your drivers don't have to worry about whether your trucks or buses will talk to all of the various chargers that you might have on site, and vice versa. And then how do you optimize that asset utilization? Thinking about smart charging and fleet management systems are a great way to get a handle on the 30, 40, 50 chargers and trucks that you might have running around on your depot. And then finally, getting creative again with those integrated grid solutions, energy management systems, energy storage, and on-site generation are ways you can really think about the future and plan for the grid piece of it, which again, I'll go back to it, engaging the utilities early and often. So my final thing I just want to say is the biggest lesson learned is pilot projects really are valuable for scaling for the future. Learning from those, working with the various stakeholders, and really executing your project is important. That is all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Really appreciate it. And we're already getting quite a few questions in the chat. I would encourage you, if you have other questions for Ruth or our other speakers, to keep on putting them into the attendee chat. And one option, if we can't address it during the Q&A, is that we'll be able to do some type of one-on-one follow-up. We'll have all the logs of the questions. So please submit those. It'd be great. Our next speaker is Rob from FIER Automotive. There he is. All right, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Thank you, Erin, for the introduction, and thanks to the people of Forth for giving us this stage to present. As mentioned, my name is Rob Kroon. I'm a project manager at FIER Automotive in the Netherlands. Short introduction for the company that I work for. We're a business and project development company focusing on the sustainable mobility and transport sector. As you're probably all aware, is that there's going to be a substantial change in the upcoming years, and is already going with regards to the more sustainable way we approach to things. And FIER's ambition is to facilitate this global transition, and then focusing on this topic of sustainable mobility and transport. And we're doing that by combining our knowledge, the network, the experience that we've gained over the last couple of years, and of course the tools in order to facilitate this uptake. And we've got in that way a simplified two-way approach. That on one hand we try to stimulate policies for governmental organizations, for national and regional organizations, governmental organizations, as well as for that we try to proactively realize more e-mobility on the road, and that can be in terms of car sharing, electric trucks, two-wheelers, charging infrastructure. So in multiple directions. But today I'm here to talk a little bit more about the heavy-duty part. I've got 4 example projects from FIER. EGLM project is what I'm going to show you in upcoming slides, so I'm not going to discuss that. On the right top corner, we've got the Zebra project, where we are working together with DAF, a Packard company, where we are trying to introduce 14 full electric OEM trucks that will be introduced next year. We are working together with, on the left lower corner, with a large retailer in the Netherlands, where we are working on some smaller vehicles, light electric vehicles. 60 e-vehicles will be introduced also in this year and upcoming year. And another example is the ZEF Alliance report that we've written together with CALSTART. I will highlight that at the end of this presentation. The market of battery electric trucks is changing quite significantly. Here we've got an overview of a couple of trucks in terms of the gross train weight, gross combination weight, and the range that is currently available by retrofitters in Europe. And we also see here that a couple of OEMs are also on the market offering their vehicles. But what we can also see that in the future are going to be a lot more. So in the upcoming 2-3 years, there's going to be a significant increase in the OEMs offering battery electric trucks, and the scale is going to be bigger. The ranges will increase, and then there will more likely between 150 and 300 kilometers of range. Of course, except for the to be introduced Teslas and Nicolas. Just a second, my slide deck is a little bit slower than yours, I guess, because of the delay on our internet connection. These are a couple of examples of the trucks that are coming to the market. I'll not go into much depth over there. But what I wanted to show is that within Europe, the numbers of electric freight vehicles are climbing increasingly. As you can see on the left graph, but on the right graph, you can also see the pie chart where the US and Europe compared to China are not really there yet. So we've got some room to catch up. Let me see. So this is, I wanted to tell you something a little bit more about our practical experience on the EGLM project, which we have initiated and where we are the project manager of. Unfortunately, it are not 44 trucks, it are 44-ton trucks. We are aiming at 7 and are currently at 4. So, and that's what we think is already an interesting achievement. The GLM project is mainly initiated because of the last mile distribution from inland ports in some key areas in Europe. One of them in Venlo and the other one in Duisburg. And it's about intermodal transport, where we have combined a couple of transport companies willing to invest in electric trucks, and we've been working on that since 2017. This is the truck that we've chosen. It's a Framo truck. It's a converted truck based on a MAN chassis, 44 tons, big power, so almost 500 kilowatts, 12,000 newton meters of torque. Currently, we're driving around with 231 kilowatt hours, but it will increase to 345. The charging infrastructure, what we focus on in this presentation, there are a couple of differences between the trucks. So on a couple of trucks we are charging with DC, and on others we are charging with AC, and that's for the night chargers. For the ultra fast chargers, we are planning to have 4 350 kilowatt CCS chargers DC on strategic locations. To combine that to achieve a combined waiting time with loading time. And for Ruth, the DC chargers, they are all from ABB, so that's good that you know. So we're going to test a couple of different logistic schemes. So what I mentioned, we're going to test on performance and behavior of the vehicles and the charging infrastructure. We're going to optimize the systems to make the maximum, get the maximum out of the truck, let them drive as much as possible, and we're going to analyze driving behavior and their satisfaction. And what we have learned so far is that, with regards to charging, then of course, is that we've walked into some high investment costs with regards to the grid connections. As you might know, the charging points themselves, especially the DC on a high voltage level, they're relatively not that cheap. But you do not have to underestimate the grid connection cost. There can be one-time investments, but also the recurring investments that you have to do in order to get the right grid capacity. And in the Netherlands and in Germany, we've experienced some delays in the grid connection realization. So that's again a thing where we, in some of the worst cases, had to wait for more than a year for the utilities to get the right grid connection on site. And there could be some minor errors that what we have experienced in the beginning between the communication between the vehicle and the charger. The general findings are that it's of course a living lab. We're running against some obstacles, of course, once in a while. But now that the trucks are driving a little bit more, drivers are getting more and more enthusiastic. Planners are optimizing the utilization, and customers have the project partners have gained new contracts and new customers. Difficult journey, complex, not easy, but definitely worth it, according to our partners in the project. So this last slide is about one of the reports. So the EGLM project is an fine example of how we like to put vehicles into practice, to put the vehicles on the road and to test with that. But as mentioned, we're also working for a governmental organization, and this is a fine example where we are nearly finished with an interesting report on moving zero-emission freight towards commercialization. It's an assignment that CALSTART and FIER got from the ZEV Alliance. And within this report, we have discussed, or we will discuss numbers of trucks, the future availability, charging infrastructure, total cost of ownership, grid connections, but also the disruptive technologies that might be impacting, as well as some of the legislations, the governmental regulations, purchase subsidies, etc. So when it's finally out, we highly recommend it to read it. And I think that Bill is going to talk a little bit more about, especially the charging infrastructure part. So this is my presentation. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Rob, and it was great to. Erin didn't mean to jump in there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Get in there. We're good.
Well, we'll just jump right in and move on. And with Rob's setup, what I'll do is start maybe at a little bit higher level. We got really good on the ground information from Ruth, and we got to look at what's going on in Europe from Rob. What I'll do is I'll start at kind of a high level of what's going on with the trends. And then what does that mean practically on the ground for our implementation? And we have really enjoyed working with FIER on this global outlook for how we're going to electrify not just freight vehicles, but really all medium and heavy duty commercial vehicles. What I want to walk through is the time to prepare is now. You really need to get in front of infrastructure when you want to put trucks on the road. You don't want to wait for the last minute. We'll talk about some best practices that are emerging in depot charging and planning. Talk about emerging hub charging, which we're starting to see develop, particularly in Europe, and I think we will see here. Corridor planning, and then, wow, some really exciting, scary things going on with heavy-duty fast charging. So just a quick background on CALSTART. We're a clean transportation nonprofit. We have about 250 members, mostly North America, but increasingly worldwide, and our goal is really to drive this industry forward to get clean air, good jobs, and fight climate change. This is really what's driving an awful lot of people in the United States. California has recently enacted essentially a zero-emission requirement for trucks. It's got some pretty aggressive goals in terms of getting by 2030 to about 30% of all commercial vehicles being electric. And this is something that's not just a California thing. There's been 14 other states in the District of Columbia have kind of adopted the same rule. Maybe not the regulation yet, but essentially the goal. And they will be setting up action plans to achieve that, including 100% by 2050. It's also something we work with our global commercial vehicle Drive to Zero program with multiple partners, more than 80 around the world, but 9 of them are nations of the world. And they are also looking at putting in either these tough standards or they're already achieving them. So this is something that we're seeing. It's what's driving model availability. Rob kind of alluded to this, but just in North America, we're seeing, you can't always find all the vehicles you want today, but boy, they are starting to come over the next 3 years. We expect the vehicle volumes to double in terms of model availability, particularly in medium duty to start, but also a strong growth in Class 8 tractors for regional applications, as well as transit and a variety of vocational duties in cities. This is kind of the time frame that we've looked at, and we set up this beachhead strategy to really help people get their arms around what is the expected timing for the rollout of these technologies and what should we be planning for. So from transit bus, we're really starting to see this last mile and urban delivery and just any kind of delivery in the urban setting starting to grow. That will very quickly follow on its heels with heavy duty Class 8, and eventually post 2025 we'll be looking actually at some corridor long haul, which we'll talk about in a second. These are some of the models that we've seen announced, including from Ford, but also from a lot of new arrivals, no pun intended, with arrival being one of them in the marketplace. And this is for that really exciting urban delivery segment, but also urban logistics is right on the heels. These are vehicles that you could actually order today in certain markets. But there are challenges to getting those vehicles on the road. It's not just getting them available, it's getting them powered. Unit installation cost is pretty high. You definitely need to work with utilities, and ideally we will have the utilities investing in this. There are pretty big impacts compared to light duty, and we'll walk through this in a second. They're very large. There's issues with demand charge, and we won't deep dive into that issue, but really maintaining and managing your peak charging needs is a big deal to the business case. We still have some standards that need to be fully solidified and developed in this space, and we need more investment from utilities, particularly municipal utilities, but investor-owned as well. I use this chart not to complicate things, but just to give you a sense of, and everybody knows this, but you really need to understand, trucks are not cars. And while we're rolling out a lot of charging, both at homes, at work sites, and even in some aggregation sites for light duty, the grid impact is not that huge per vehicle and even in the aggregate, except in really, really high fast charge locations. When you start moving into medium duty trucks and buses, though, the vehicle sizes for battery packs are just quite a bit bigger. The amount of energy and numbers of vehicles at any one site really creates a much bigger demand for load. And as you can see, as you move into heavy duty, with some of the turnaround times those vehicles may have, the size of the battery packs, and maybe their operation, over a longer distances, there's going to be a huge impacts there. To put that in a more graphic sense, you can see a Chevy Volt is pretty small with 100 of them. Look at what putting 50 e-buses in, and we're starting to see depots now upwards of 100 buses. So there's a big impact as electric buses really start to roll out. And they're been our first indicator of this challenge of infrastructure. School buses, pretty simple deployments, overnight charging, level 2, they can even use AC charging. Some of them are going to low-level DC fast charge. But as you start to move into transit depots, the space claim, the amount of power needed to the site, these really add huge demand considerations. Utilities really do want you to plan early. These are just some really good examples from Southern California Edison of really what it takes to break up the concrete, put in trenching. And they really, and Ruth pointed to this, it's so important. Vision yourself into the future, even if you're only going to put a few vehicles on the road right away, because the utility needs lead time to plan for the capacity that may be needed for you at build out. So really start to vision where you're going with this. You also want to, if you can, align it, some of the best practices with changes you're making already in your facility, so you can kind of double dip or really cross-pollinate with those activities and not have them be independent. And this image I just used just to show this is pretty intense. So you don't want to lay this conduit twice. Ideally, you will be laying conduit once, even if you're not going to use the power that would be available from those conduits right away. We're seeing that right now, most people are still doing depot night charging. They're using relatively smaller rates of charge, but we're very quickly moving into the 150 to 350 kilowatt charge range. And coming down the pike, 1 to 3 megawatt per vehicle charge rates. And we'll talk about that in just a second. We've created kind of a tool to help people get their arms around this planning, because you really, as you're thinking about a truck, you need to think about infrastructure at the same time. And we've seen some cases where people have ordered trucks, and by the time the trucks arrive, and there is some lead time involved in those vehicles, the infrastructure is still not ready. There is lead time. The utilities will say there's several months of planning time that you want to do. You need to go through permitting and siting issues. The actual installation for just a few trucks shouldn't take that long. But for a really big install, if it's going to be 20, 50, 100 trucks or buses, utility could need 3 to 4 years to put in enough capacity. So you want to have a long lead time for that. Now, as we're seeing this with some of these demo projects that were alluded to before, the Volvo Lights project, very exciting. There's already a handful of vehicles that are moving out, more are coming. But interestingly, the vehicles had a little bit of a delay as we waited for some of the infrastructure, not the chargers, but actually getting capacity and interconnect with the utilities up and running. Really big projects like this one have been very instructive. Frito-Lay is building an entirely new zero emissions or low NOx facility in their Modesto site in California. And it includes solar integrated with energy storage, charging multiple types of trucks at one site, yard hostlers, delivery trucks, and even longer haul tractors. So they're really trying to build an interconnected system and learn from that. And in this case, they're actually going to be able to store energy when it's cheap, reuse it, and protect the grid later when they do the charging it. And this is something a lot of people are taking a close look at. And there we go. I just wanted to show this one because people are also now starting to look at these long distance corridors. We've been involved in a couple of studies along the west coast of the United States, looking at what would it take for this, what is the expected load for these vehicles as they roll out, and then what do the utilities need to plan for to be able to support urban hubs and then charging along these corridors. And the rates that people are looking at is 1 to 3 megawatt. When you really get into these between cities, we probably don't need this so much for our urban delivery and urban logistics. But really, as we start to have these vehicles going out and back on longer distance runs, we're looking at charge receptacles on the order of this. This is a charge point 2 megawatt connector design, liquid cooled systems, but really need to think about the capacity of the utilities to support this. So one of the reasons we pulled together a coalition of suppliers, manufacturers, utilities, and others, even at the federal level, is we just need more tools and funding to support this. So we're trying to get funding not just for vehicle incentives, but for infrastructure so we get ahead of this curve. So I think this pretty much wraps up what I wanted to touch on. I know it was kind of rapid fire and high level, but we really are on the cusp of a rapid revolution and phase up and scale up of this technology. But really what we all need to get our hands around is utilities need to really start to weigh in on this now, and fleets need to start visioning forward. Even as you're thinking about 1 to 2 to 5, envision yourself out at full deployment, because that's the conversation you want to have with utilities at this point. So with that, Erin, I'm done and happy to take questions with the team.
Awesome, thank you. If every one of our presenters can turn on your webcam at this time, we can jump into the Q&A. Thanks for my speakers for staying on time. I didn't even have to come in and bribe you to stop talking. Gives us more time for Q&A, so I always appreciate that. We have a ton of questions. I'm going to start really just with some charging basics. Just thinking about what type of charging standards are we using right now? Are the vehicles charging DC or AC? Is it CCS1? Is it CCS2? And if you could speak a little bit about what's driving that choice now and how we might expect that to change over time. That's a big question. So
that is a big question. I mean, the first answer to that, and I think Ruth should really weigh in, but the first answer is yes, all of the above. And I think that's one of the shakeouts. I think in the heavy duty space, we're transitioning to a version of CCS. Now in Europe, it's CCS2. In the US, we think it may be CCS1, but there's even debate on that. And then we're going to have whatever this heavy duty standard is. The bus industry's kind of reached some commonality on their overhead charge rate, but I think it's it's still up in the air, the standard that people will have when they're at the depot. Ruth, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree. It is still up in the air. It's a little less than the light duty passenger side. Like you said, it seems like we're kind of converging on the overhead. But it is still, there's some discrepancies around, what's better, CCS1, CCS2. And then we've got our friends at Tesla who are potentially doing something even different. And what does that look like for people who want to own a Tesla truck and then also maybe the Volvo truck or something like that? So it is important that we all work together. I mean, Bill had mentioned Charin and things like that, so that we all get the voice to get to the solution that works best for everyone.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree with both of you. When we look at AC charging, that's always like, if you look at night charging, slow charging, you look at either low capacity DC charging or AC charging. And I think there is also, like, usually conventional passenger vehicles, they or electric passenger vehicles, they usually charge with AC at night. This is especially in the heavy duty sector, definitely moving towards DC. When we're scaling up, when we saw the big plans, the pictures that Bill showed, they will highly likely be all DC chargers, just because of the cost. Otherwise, you need an onboard inverter, adding cost to the vehicle, adding weight to the vehicle as well. And this is much easier, and eventually on a big scale, much better to do it in a DC shape.
Hey, just one other observation on that. I think one of the things we've wanted to see is some alignment on light duty standards, and we're seeing the CCS1 combo plug for light duty fast charging, so we could have shared facilities for regional fast charge hubs for TNCs and for, say, medium duty delivery trucks to have a top off point. So I think it is important that we get to a standardization. We have found that for medium duty trucks or buses like school buses, you could probably use the AC system, but as everybody starts to really want to look at vehicle to grid or vehicle to facility, you're probably going to want to get into the DC structure so that you can make use of the two-way power transfer.
Perfect transition to my next question about V2G, and thinking it through. How realistic is that in the near future? What are the vehicles currently able to do in that regard? And what are other barriers allowing us to get to V2G?
Well, I don't think the utilities are ready for it first, so that's barrier number one. I think there's been some great tests showing the full capability of doing it. Where we have found more interest from people right now is more vehicle to facility, as opposed to maybe all the way back to the grid, being able to use the vehicle and share energy maybe back with the facility for emergency services. And behind the meter storage, so you're really managing on a grid, on a facility site, and then maybe aggregating from the facility up rather than from the vehicle up. So I think it's still in the shakeout phase, but some of the school buses, like from Navistar, are going to be equipped with two-way power transfer right from the get-go. So people are seeing that that's a capability we'll need down the road.
Yeah, other thoughts from the technology needs to get there as well. Sorry, it was a little bit of delay. The technology needs to get there as well, because there are so many, projects going on right now that the infrastructure isn't set up to handle that V2G as well. So getting to a point where you've got that capability, and then how do you manage that? And, what is the kind of software smart charging side of that piece too? Because it can't just be, oh, I want this. It's, you again have to plan for the future. You can, once you've got them installed and operational, then it's the actual execution of that piece too, which I personally haven't had experience with yet, and I hope to one day. But I think that that's the other side of it, is we have to have the technology kind of at least oiled out a little bit better before we start to scale that too.
Yeah, I think there are multiple levels, of course, of how smart a charging could be. And I think when we're talking about vehicle to grid or vehicle to the local grid, that's already quite high level. But it could already be very interesting when, for example, a 44-ton Class 8 truck is charging at a at a at a facility where there's cooling, and the cooling jumps in the retail store. That it automatically also lowers the speed of charging. So it doesn't. So the level of total energy consumption stays below a certain level. I think there are different steps. This is just one example, of course, but there are different steps towards the full vehicle to grid solution.
It's a great reminder. I think we often forget about all of the advantages of just load management, and we immediately go into like the holy grail of like power transport. So thanks for that reminder that there are some really great benefits just to doing V1G, which is just unidirectional but managed charging. A couple other questions came in about solar and battery usage. I don't know if anyone can speak to experience of having solar and battery at a site, and what helps influence that decision. And if you're not using solar and batteries, why not?
Yeah, that is interesting. At our facility, at our headquarters in Pasadena, we actually have a solar carport, and bringing that energy in, so we can all not just run our business but charge our cars off the sun, which is kind of cool. But I think some of the integration systems, kind of what Rob was pointing out, are not fully baked yet, and we do need some better control systems to be able to manage facility and vehicle loads and that whole ecosystem. We are seeing that there are people, though. You're not going to get like one solar panel charges one car. That's just not enough capacity. But you're seeing things like this. I mentioned this Modesto Frito-Lay facility. They're going to have 1.2 megawatts of capacity for production of electricity from a solar array, and they're going to be storing that in 1.2 megawatt hours worth of battery packs. So what they're doing is a really cool thing. They're going to be able to trickle and continue to bring in that energy from the solar grid and then use it when the trucks need it at the right time, but also to manage, as Rob was talking about, that facility load. And this is really the secret sauce right now, is keeping your demand load profile in control for the whole facility and for the truck charging. So the grid allows you to get potentially really cheap energy and then use it at the right time to protect yourself from hitting the grid too hard. And I think that is actually one of the really big benefits of integrating solar or other renewables right.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. That's perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. We also haven't really talked about wireless charging or possible advancements towards autonomous. I can imagine what the answers might be. It might be similar to this like holy grail thing, but I would love to get your thoughts on that as well.
I can start. I mean, this is definitely more my opinion around at least the wireless charging piece. I come from the Midwest, and I don't think that, there's the elemental piece to it. How do you make sure that the infrastructure, the ground and things like that aren't disrupted? I think it would have to be a case where it's indoor in a controlled environment, for you to make sure you've got no kind of additional elemental issues that would cause problems down the road for maybe the wireless charging to not be ideal for parking spaces or whatever that application may be. Again, that's my personal opinion on it. I think it's great for certain places, maybe where the climate is not as much of a factor, but the climate just causes so many additional issues, maybe with the road, or like I said, even if it's a parking spot. I just don't see it as kind of a sustainable solution depending on the location.
Yeah.
Rob, you want to weigh in on Europe?
Yeah, I think there. I go a little bit besides the question. It's about alternatives besides charging with the cable. Yeah, wireless is one of them. You can do it connected. You can also take a look at a couple of examples with the pantograph system, also a dynamic pantograph system. There are all sorts of solutions which are currently being tested where cable charging is relevant now. So we can go up to 350 kilowatts. Right now, you can buy that and apply that to your vehicle. Not all of the trucks are equipped for that, but a couple of them are. But in the future, we will need to increase that speed even more. And if we can do that with the cable, that could be a solution. But an alternative where the drivers do not have to be as much involved in the charging process, and there will be less errors, less less hiccups, less delays, downtimes. So I believe in the future where there will be alternatives. And when it then comes to will it be wireless or will it be connected, there are so many opportunities left, and most of them are at quite a low TRL level. I'm just curious what's going to happen. But the first announced and the one that Bill showed in the picture, the 1 megawatt, 1 to 3 megawatt connection, I think that's going to be the next big step.
Yeah, on wireless, we've been doing a lot of work on that, particularly in bus applications. And I hear what Ruth is saying. There may be some situations where you don't know where that plate is to drive over, depending on snow or other conditions. In the Southwest, it's actually worked pretty well. And when they don't want the driver having to get out, actually attach something, or they don't want to build the overhead charging support, so the wireless has worked pretty well for short linger times to keep topping up a bus on a route. We've also seen it in port applications, interestingly, where there's some work rules where people don't want to or are not allowed to actually plug in these large, like a large container handling piece of equipment. That is actually a really interesting technology then, to allow somebody to just drive it, center it, and then all of a sudden it charges during a break, and you can keep that piece of equipment in service. So there could be automated ways of doing that. And in fact, where we're seeing some of the automation show up is just in being able to center a bus and having some of the automated controls to bring it over to the right point for passenger egress. So we may find automation ties into how you would center the vehicle over the right place for charging, whether it's overhead or in the ground. And that's where we're seeing some of the first automation hit the ground now, except for some of those pilots we're seeing with long haul trucks now at the moment.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate all those thoughts. One other question that came in was, how do we approach shared charging depots in terms of like who's paying for the infrastructure and coordinating charging across the fleets? Have we seen examples where there is shared charging across different types of fleets that are able to share just the cost, as well as being able to utilize the same infrastructure, whether it be light duty and medium duty and heavy duty? Can we talk a little bit about those types of partnerships and what would make that be able to actually come into fruition?
So we're seeing some of this already in China, where they've got some fast charge sites that multiple different fleet types can share, which is really an interesting model. They're doing it for their logistics, but kind of medium duty logistics fleets. In Oslo, they've set up a fast charge hubs on the outskirts of the city, so a truck can come in, deliver something, and then transfer it to a smaller electric truck to bring into the city. And they allow multiple vendors to charge at these sites. So we're starting to see this in Europe, and I'm really enthused about the next step of it for the U.S., where we might be able to have maybe TNCs and maybe medium duty trucks all kind of fast charging in a shared hub. You'd have to have interoperability. You'd have to have the ability to use different payment mechanisms, and that's still kind of shaking out. But I think this is really a powerful space. I think in the short term, probably the public has to be involved in this because there's no absolutely good business model for a private operator to just leap in yet. But I think over time we'll start to see that this could be actually a really great business model if we can find enough aggregation of demand and keep utilization up at these sites.
Yeah. I think for so a practical thing where we are struggling with regards to the EGLM project, we're planning the 350 kilowatt chargers, and they will be public available. They will be on private property, so the companies, the partners in the project will invest in it, but they will be public available. And of course, in the beginning, there will be no other electric trucks in the area charging with that on that charging point, but that will be in the future. So what we're working together also with the Dutch guys from ABB is to make a reservation system on it. So at least the ones who are paying for the realization of this charging infrastructure will have a certain time slots in their schedule, making sure that the truck is not standing in line on these specific charging locations. But this is like a real practical thought towards it, of course.
So public chargers for trucks. Is that kind of what we're starting to see, that type of business model where it'll be kind of like a gas station?
Yeah, I think there's this great group in it's Västra Götaland, which is the western region of Sweden where Gothenburg is, kind of like equivalent to a state in Sweden. And they're starting to look at, okay, depot charging is where trucks are going to be first because that's where the duty cycles are the best. But we really need to flesh out the ability of no truck left behind. So if you have a heavy load, it's a hot day, you're climbing a hill, you don't run out of juice. So they've been looking at where in the route distribution system would the ideal point for 5 or 6 public chargers, or at least charging sites. And they're going to start by doing it publicly. We probably don't need as many as we have diesel stations by any stretch, but probably what we need to do is augment the route structures. And then these can be, support mechanisms eventually for intercity trucks that would come in and maybe need a top up.
Oop, I think we're getting kicked off.
There's a message.
Yeah, let me say there will be an ability to share out the slides with everyone who's attended. We have a list of all the questions, ones that we weren't able to get to at this point. I just want to, if you could have one last word, each presenter, 20 seconds, what's one thing that you would recommend to the folks listening today?
Plan forward, get your arms around it now, and let's get the utilities more involved.
I would say, go ahead.
I was actually also thinking about, because what Bill said was quite good. No, I think it's indeed plan ahead, make sure that you already indeed install, think about the installations that you need within the next 5 years, and not even if you only start with one truck as a pilot one.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I was just going to say, plan ahead so that you allow for your project to be more patient and not, all of a sudden you're rushed because you didn't think about a few different things and you're up against the wire to try to meet a deadline. I get it. It's exciting and you want to get everything going and it all electrified right now, but think about the future so that you can have a little breathing room in your projects.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Cindy, close us out.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, and a great big thank you to our fabulous moderator, Erin, and our speakers, Ruth, Bill, and Rob. As we mentioned, here are the contact infos for our presenters today. We didn't get through all of the questions, but we'll be sharing along with the slides some of the questions, and we'll be CCing our presenters to keep the conversation going. So if you have any additional questions that we didn't get through today, please feel free to reach out to our speakers, or you can reach out to us at info@fourthmobility.org, and we'll get that question answered. As we said, we'll be sending out the recording and the presentation slides along with some additional resources that will help you through thinking about the process of heavy-duty charging after the webinar. And then we hope you can join us on Tuesday, October 27th. We'll be discussing electrifying city fleets. We'll be joined by Motive, the City of Portland, and Black & Veatch. to join the conversation on the considerations for cities when adopting electric vehicles into their fleet, as more cities are making the commitment to go all electric. Again, we want to say thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you all on Tuesday, October 27th. Again, thanks to our presenters and our moderator.